charity, man. Yeah, of course. Say, Bara Masumeen ka wasta.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. Yeah, I was getting to turn it up. صل على محمد وآل محمد. Muhammad. Can I please get all the brothers and sisters that are towards the entrance, please either to take your seats or to please leave in a silent and respectful manner. Salawat. Salawat. Before we start the question and answer session with Sheikh Jafar, at the stall just on the entrance here, we have the Sheikh's book, of which all proceeds will be going towards Yemen. The book is priced at £12. So if you are interested in purchasing one of Sheikh's books, please do go to the stall at the front. Salawat. So it's going to be quite an impromptu question and answer session. Hopefully it won't be too long-winded. So if you do have any questions, please just raise your hands and we will get a mic to you. Alternatively, you can write your question on a piece of paper and send it in. And for those watching online, if you do comment below, then I can see those questions and we can ask the Sheikh. Salawat. So to begin with, do we have any questions from the floor? Fantastic. So I've got a question which was handed in to us. So Sheikh, how do we ensure our children will remember and take care of us when we are old? I think with an aging population, this is a lot of concerns, especially my parents. They're always saying, you better look after me when we're old.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for taking time out of your night to sit and participate in a discussion. Of course, acquiring knowledge in Shahr Ramadan is great, but to do so on the nights of Qadr, and for many of us, tonight will also be a night of Qadr, and so to be able to do that is a great level of ibadah in and of itself. So the question that was asked is, how do we ensure our children will remember and take care of us when we are old? As you know, in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed many different ad'iyah. He has mentioned the supplications that the various prophets themselves have made. And you'll know the famous recitation, the dua, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الْحِسَابِ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. So in here there is a supplication that is for the parents. And of course one of the reasons for that is to ensure that there is a practice within the person to remember their parents constantly, to remember their needs in dunya and in akhirah. So have mercy upon them, the dua says, have mercy upon them like they had mercy upon me when I was small. So there's a psychology behind this, that we're bringing to the forefront the needs of our parents. So if this dua is instilled into a child, into a youth, as early as possible to be recited, then it will be something that they base their existence on. They will recite it regularly. They will want to act upon this regularly in the hope that when parents are in need, they would come to the need of their parents. Now, as a point that goes off on this, children tend to take their morality and their actions from their parents. Their parents are the first source of guidance in almost everything. If they see their parents treating their own parents well, it will instill in them the respect of them treating their parents well. If, however, their parents don't treat their own parents with respect, their grandparents with respect, if there's no visitation, if there's no keeping in contact, if there's no financial resources attributed, if there's no time being spent, then they will pick up on that and they will imbibe that bad practice into themselves. So if a person wants to ensure children will remember their parents, you yourself need to be the example in taking care of your parents. I would also recommend that there are a number of good dua and supplications to be read. For example, the supplication from Sahifa as-Sajjadiyya, from Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam, where he has his dua for children and for parents. And if those are regularly recited, it is a manual of looking after the needs and the concerns of one's children or of one's parents. So I would recommend those three things. Instilling that dua early on, making sure that you yourself set a good example, and the supplications from Sahih Sajjadiyya for the rights of the parents and the rights of the children.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from the floor? Yeah, Brother Ayman.
Jazakumullah khair, Shaykhna, for the enlightening series so far. So I think something linked to tabligh is maybe, and then what my question is based around is what would you say to the people who would think around, rather than doing tabligh or being outward with our religion and being proactive with others, our wider community, non-Muslim community, instead we should just focus on ourselves, and if everyone can, as in the metaphor, clean their own room and clean their own bed, then the world will be a better place. So how would you, what would your comments be on trying to make that balance of not being too outward and not focusing enough on the self, or the other way around?
Ahsant. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think it's a brilliant point. And what we've been trying to focus on in some of these discussions is saying that when we ourselves have that good akhlaq, when we have that knowledge, that will be a natural means for other people to gravitate towards us. So we do need to do that. The other element is that people, they don't know necessarily where to get knowledge from. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about in these nights, inshallah, probably in 2 nights' time, is that if you notice the trend, there is so much consumption of information at the moment, because there's so much access to it through phones, through laptops, and so on and so forth. The number of media channels that we have out there, the number of religious channels that we have out there, and so on and so forth. What that means is that there is an increased level of desire for consumption of knowledge and truth, but there's so much confusion about what truth and knowledge really is. So the reason why we want to emphasize on going out and actually having a proactive stance is because it's something that we're lacking in. I think in terms of our religion and exporting our religion, we're doing phenomenally well anyway as it is. And that's without any plan. That's without even thinking about a proper structure of tabligh. So imagine where we could be if we were managed to put a structure in place. So one doesn't negate the other. One cannot really go out and bring other people towards your own faith if you yourself are not properly representing it, if you yourself have not lived that tradition yourself. It's very difficult to be able to do that. So I don't put one before the other, but I feel that we're very much neglecting the second. we always talk about self-development. We always have a focus on the idea of how to be able to improve oneself. Very rarely do we come together to speak about going out. That's the first part. So the second part of my reflection on your question would be that when we talk about going out and when we talk about trying to deliver the message, the people that we're trying to reach, a fundamental question has to be asked. To what extent do those people have a right on us? If I work only on myself, which is absolutely necessary, I inshallah will develop myself, and as a result of that, I will have hopefully the akhlaq, the knowledge, the wisdom, so that whenever someone comes to me or when I'm in engagement with them, I'll be able to provide what is right. That doesn't necessarily fulfill the criterion that those individuals have a right over me. Now, if you look at some of the ayat of the Quran, you'll notice that sometimes these individuals will make a complaint and will say, if only I had been guided. Will you now have mercy on me? Send me back and I would do better. Now we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds in certain ways and says that they will never do better, they will do the same. Did we not send communications to you? But we can see that there is a regret that exists from these individuals. From our own perspective, we often say, I wish I had known that before. I wish that I had been made aware of that when I was younger, so I could have acted by it, and so on and so forth. And that's from us who exist within the faith. You can imagine those, may Allah bless them, who are living in such a disastrous cycle of a life. Get up, work, go out, get drunk, come home. Just a life that's, being pushed in any direction depending on whatever the media tells them to think or to believe. Those individuals have a right on us, and that right that they have on us is that we are supposed to have delivered to them these messages so that they can have an informed choice of the way in which they live. If we don't have that, then we are not fulfilling our baseline responsibility upon them as individuals. So, as I said, I completely agree there is a need to reform the self, but I also feel that there is a need to actively go out and engage the religion with other people, for other people are at a massive loss without us being able to do so. What are your reflections on that then?
I think I definitely agree that there's a marinization between the two. Or focus on one extreme or the other. I think there's always still going to be a concern, and even in today's lecture you talked about how we shouldn't be biased in what we are perpetuating onto others. So then I think that sometimes puts a massive flag of caution about whenever I say anything, and if I might paraphrase incorrectly or I may misunderstand and communicate a hadith with a certain intent, when I'm actually, could I say 100% this is what the Imam intended and this is the message behind it. So I think that would be my only caution that I'd take with that.
So in 2 nights' time, when we start... Thank you. I can take this off or keep... So in 2 nights' time, inshallah, and in 2 or 3 nights' time, we're going to be talking about interfaith versus intra-faith. And we will present certain ahadith whereby Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam trained people to be debaters on their behalf and discouraged people who weren't ready to debate in public, either because their knowledge was not there or their akhlaq is not there. So it's not that we shouldn't be cautious, we should be cautious. However, the point of our discussion was to say that when you're going to call people, make sure that you're calling it not towards your own personal whims. If you can stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment and say, I am not being calling towards my own personal interpretations, then you're in a strong position. Allah will bless and endorse that. And that's why the emphasis on memorization of ayat, of ahadith, so that when we're speaking, we're not speaking from our own selves. And it becomes objective. There's a famous hadith of the 6th Imam alayhi salam where he says, just tell people our words and they will come to us. Right? So I think, which is something we'll be speaking about, as I said, in 2 and 3 nights, So that's the starting point. Once you and I become more adept to knowing the intricacies, the nuances of debates, and we learn them, flow with them, go with them, bring them out on people. But the idea is not to be doing something where we're just replicating what others are doing. We're calling towards our own understanding. We're calling towards a style of the faith which is not true in and of itself. I don't think that people should be overly cautious. I think as long as that they can stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, I know what I was calling to was haqq, then that's our minimum responsibility.
Thank you. Can we try and limit the answers, if that's okay, so we can get through as many questions as possible? So I think 2 minutes.
Inshallah.
That's great, thank you. So I've got a question online. How do we maintain and continue our spirituality through the year, especially for this holy month? Do you have any practical tips and advice which you can give?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The whole purpose of Shahr Ramadan is to break from the cycle that we have gotten ourselves into, the rut that we have got ourselves into for 11 months. We normally are in need of certain food at a certain time. We have to break that. We're normally in need of a certain amount of sleep. We end up breaking that. And we begin to realize the fullness of our own potential. So we make sure that our day is centered around salah. Our day is centered around recitation of Quran. Our day is centered around making sure we recite certain ad'iyah, and so on and so forth. And the reason as to why we feel so elevated spiritually is because over a period of days and weeks, that becomes our normative state. It becomes normal for us to ensure that we are awake on time for Fajr, and that we're bang on time praying our Maghrib. It becomes normal for us to regulate how much we are eating and what we are eating. All of those things are what makes the soul ascend. So when we finish Shahr Ramadan, it means that we have to continue whatever good cycles and programs that we put in for ourselves. If we go back to what we were doing in the month of Rajab and Sha'ban, then you will feel like you were in the months of Rajab and Sha'ban. As long as you participate in Shawwal with what you've been doing and learning and achieving in the month of Shahr Ramadan, then inshallah you will continue in your ascension of spirituality after.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor before I continue? No? Okay. So I've got a question here which is, how should we think about the argument of an all-good God being a contradiction to the existence of evil in the world? So they're saying, if God is all good, all merciful, then why is there so much evil in the world? And is that not a contradiction to the initial statement?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assuming God is all good, which we make that assumption, assuming God is all good, then evil doesn't come from Him. Evil must come from another source. What is that source? It is me. So if I am the source of the evil, then I cannot attribute that evil to God. If I'm the one who has done an evil, it means that I cannot place that upon the shoulders, metaphorically speaking, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It requires me to change my own behaviors. Now,
sometimes we have very shallow conversation around good and evil. Sometimes when we have these debates with atheists or something of that nature. The reality is that our understanding of what is good and what is evil is a very limited understanding of what is good. From the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that may be good for me, I consider it to be evil. Right? So, for example, if an illness comes to me, I think that that is evil. If I lose my job, I will think that is evil. What we don't realize is that whatever happens from the perspective of God, whatever God gives us, whatever He allows to occur to us, is essentially good, because it is for a greater purpose, which is to help us to realize where we are in terms of our own thinking, our own practices, our own responses, to help us elevate and become better than what we were yesterday. Now, if a person has a different starting point, that the whole existence is about the 70 years that they live in this world, then there's nothing to achieve or beyond that. If your starting point is this 70 years is the accumulation of good deeds, of which at the end of it, the better I do, the greater the reward in the hereafter, then the way in which I would navigate and deal with those things that come to me is likely to be very different. I wouldn't see them as evil. The whole word in itself is wrong. I wouldn't see it as evil. I would see it as an opportunity to be able to improve myself, whatever that is. So it's because we are stuck in a very one-dimensional understanding of God and my own existence that I'm willing to talk about things at this particular level. I would say, when we ask these sorts of questions, have a different perspective. Look at it from the perspective of God. And if you look at it from the perspective of God, all of these freedoms, all of these events take place at a completely different level. Sometimes they occur at the individual level, sometimes at the social level, sometimes at the entirety of the humanitarian level. But humanity is supposed to improve themselves through certain events. He mentions this, for example, in the Quran. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. This corruption has occurred on the land and the sea by what man's hands have wrought. In the verse he says, why? So that you can return back to him. Evil exists. He allows it to exist. But for the purpose that people would return back on themselves. They would become aware and do better. They wouldn't allow themselves to live in that same state. To understand this, we would see the whole conversation around God's essential goodness and the evil that He allows to occur is a far greater plan at play. It's just that whether we realize or we don't realize it, whether we actively participate in it or we ignore the width of that plan. There was a clip I was watching from David Attenborough. I think everybody knows David Attenborough is this phenomenal zoologist, this great individual from the history of mankind who provided us so much insight into the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He made such a good point. He said, he was talking about faith and whether he could be God or not. And he said, because you know how often I have to open like a beehive or an ant hill or something like that. He says sometimes there's these giant ant hills, right? He says what I'll do is I'll come and I'll cut off the top of the ant hill. I'll take the top off and then I'll look down into it. The ants are completely oblivious. They continue going about their work. They are gathering food, they are protecting the queen. They don't even know I'm there. They're just getting on with it. He says he imagines God to be the same way. We don't have the senses necessarily to perceive. God is above, watching, here. He's going about our day. If your assumption is that God doesn't exist, then the events of evil and good are confined within the 60, 70 years of your existence. You realize God is present. Whatever happens has a bigger consequence. Bigger consequence when Attenborough cuts off the hilltop, the ant hill. The ants don't realize it, but there's something bigger taking place at this moment, isn't it? He's showing us, he's putting a camera, he's showing us the existence of this thing. Sometimes because we're very limited and locked in, we don't realize. We have to see beyond, we have to see from the perspective of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's when we see the bigger picture of the events that we call evil. Thank you. Any questions?
My question is, to what extent what occurs to us is as a result of our own occurrences and choices? Should I think that everything bad that happens to me is because of my own evil that I have done? To what extent should I ponder on that?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a number of verses around this particular issue. And He mentions in the Holy Quran that if it is something that is done by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we're not in a position to be able to attribute it to evil to Him. If it's something that comes from our own selves, then it is us who need to take account and responsibility of that particular action.
So he will say, for example, no evil befalls in the universe or in your own selves, but that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was aware of it and that He brought it into existence. So whenever these events happen, we have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of that particular event. But we have to understand whether this is an event that occurs as a result of my own action, or it comes about as a result of from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the only way we can have that differentiation is by thinking deeply about the event, whether the event comes from us or whether the event comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in Surah An-Nisa, chapter number 4, verses 78 and 79, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this. He says the following: wherever you are, death will overtake you. Now, of course, this was addressing people who had an arrogance in them, but also a fear that if they were to go onto the battlefield, then they would come towards death. And so if they stayed off the battlefield, it's better that they stay off the battlefield so that they avoid the potential of death. God says, wherever you are, death would overtake you. Even if you are in lofty towers, you think that you're protected from death, even if you're in the highest tower, Allah can take you. Then he says, this is from Allah. And if a misfortune befalls them, they say, this is from you. So if they were now going to the battlefield and their arm was to be cut off, they would say, oh Muhammad, it's your fault. This is from you, Ya Rasulullah. I wouldn't have had my arm cut off had it not been for you making us go to battle. So if a misfortune befalls them, they say, this is from you. The response says in the Quran, say, قُلْ كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first level. Theologically, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verse 79 continues. Whatever benefit comes to you, it is from Allah. And whatever misfortune befalls you, it is from yourself. So the first verse, verse 78 said what? قُلْ كُلٌّ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Second verse said, sometimes it is from Allah. Whatever benefit comes is from Allah, and whatever misfortune is from yourself. Is there a contradiction here? At face value, there's a contradiction. But because it's two different ayat, Allah is addressing two different issues. In the first verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about things that come from Him. It is all from Him. Death is ordained by Allah. He decides it. Your rizq is ordained by Allah. He decides it. The theological matters say it is all from Allah. When it comes to your personal affairs, the personal matters, how you interact with people, how you decide to respond to situations, Allah says, when it comes to good matters, مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. If it's hasanat, it comes from Allah. وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. It's from yourself if it's evil. Let me give an example. You're driving, what's here, M60? What's the motorway?
Depends where you're going from. M6, M56.
M6, right? Sorry, M60. M6.
M62.
So okay, M62, M6. You're driving 100 miles an hour.
That's illegal.
I know. Don't drive at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, it's illegal. You're driving 100 miles an hour and you get pulled over by the cops and you get 6 points. Can you say, Allah, I blame you? Someone nodded. Why did you nod? You can't blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. That's you who's done it, right? So Allah says, if it's good that comes to you personally, it's from Allah. And when evil occurs, it's from your own self. So we have to realize that good comes from Allah, evil comes from me. When it comes to theological matters, decisions made by Allah about your rizq, about your health, all of these matters, if it comes from Allah, it's coming from Allah, it is good. But then I decide to smoke 20 cigarettes a day. I decide to eat, filet fish meal a day from McDonald's. And then I fall ill. Can I blame this on Allah? Why did you give me bad health? No, it's from you. This is the differentiation between good and evil and where it comes from. So Surah An-Nisa verses 78 and 79.
What about the one who never smokes but gets lung cancer?
If it's something you yourself did, because there's more than one way to get lung cancer.
So for example, there's two people, equal merits. One smokes 50 a day, perfect health. The other never touched a cigarette in his life, doesn't sit around secondhand smoke.
I was about to say, is it possible my man sitting in shisha cafes all day?
Not relevant to this question.
That's right. So again, if it's something that is given by Allah, then there's goodness in it. Because it might be a purification. It might be a test. All your life you said, Amanna billah. Now he wants to see the fruit of you saying that. But if it's from you and you are the source, the cause of that because of your lifestyle, because of your behaviors, then you can't blame Allah. Then it is an evil that occurs because of your own self.
Thank you. Any other questions before we slowly wrap it up? From the floor? Yes, Brother Ali Jafri.
There's nothing been from the sisters at all. Nothing from the sisters at all?
Sheikhna, thank you for your topic. I remember sitting with Sayyid al-Marja, al-Mudarrisi, and one of the advices he gave to us was, when you go back, make sure you spread the message of Islam and save the people from the hellfire which they're not seeing. Now, the difficulty, and you posed this in your lecture, was when you mentioned it's very difficult to mention Islam in the workplace, or it's very difficult to mention Islam generally outside. You mentioned the hadith which says, spread religion by your actions and not your words. So in this stead, we're not really being preachy when we're doing tabligh. How do you see us integrating with the society, but doing a tabligh which is, as Imam Sadiq would say, is an akhlaqi tabligh, or what the Prophet would do? And obviously we're not at the level of the Prophet, but what practical steps can we really take to do tabligh in that sense?
So this is our whole topic, inshallah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, this is our topic in our series, right?
Yes.
So tomorrow night what we plan to do is to deal with epistemological issues. So for example, we talked about how you and I might consider something to be sin and evil and others don't. And we talked about, for example, in the introductory nights, the issue of homosexuality becomes a sensitive topic because we don't know how to deal with that topic. So tomorrow we'll be speaking about that and how to cross the issues around different epistemologies, what you believe to be true and what he believes to be true, when they clash with each other. In 2 nights' time, we're going to start by answering specifically the question you've raised. And what we'll be talking about is that in 2 levels. Number one, the first thing we'll be addressing is that the West here is now premising itself off what they call Judeo-Christian values. And actually, there is no such thing. It's an invented term since 1945. And really what there are, in terms of Judeo-Christian values, Islamic values are exactly the same. So when we talk about interfaith, or when we talk about dealing with workplace issues, tabligh needs to start by showing that Islam is as normative as Judaism and Christianity is. Now we understand, because of the Enlightenment period and how much God has been taken out of the public space, people don't know what genuine Christianity and Judaism is. Right? Christianity has been reduced to singing and hymns and things like that. That's not Christianity. Christianity is a way of life, like Islam was a way of life. But only once we're able to reintroduce what Judaism and Christianity really is, Islam is normalized. That's actually what Sayyid al-Marja himself advised in his Tabligh, where he was trying to explain one of his points where he says that you need to normalize Islam in the West as much as every other religion is normalized. So we'll be talking about that in 2 nights' time. And the second thing he mentions in terms of this, he says, sometimes when we talk about saving people from hellfire, we don't just mean conversion. We mean helping them to stop a bad deed. I'll tell a story tonight, which I'll tell again from the pulpit in 2 or 3 nights' time, where he was telling one of the shuyukh. We went to him and we asked him for advice before we left the hawza for tabligh. And then we have different shuyukh, different students. One was from America, one was from this place, one from Sweden. One of them was from Scotland. So he asked Sayyid al-Marja al-Mudarrisi, how can I do tabligh? What do you recommend? He said, look, I haven't been to Scotland, but I've read enough to know what their people are like. People in Scotland, there is a lot of asabiyya. There's a lot of, help me translate asabiyya, someone. Prejudice, not racism, but yeah, racism, but prejudice amongst people. Like, he was talking at the level of Catholicism and Protestants having rivalries with each other, right? And he said a second thing about the community in Scotland is that they have a binge drinking culture. There's a lot of alcohol there, right? And he said, in terms of your tabligh, you won't be able to convert everyone to Shi'ism. He goes, that's just not possible. But if you can get one person to stop having drugs or to get off drinking alcohol, that would have saved them from the hellfire. Right? When we say tabligh, it doesn't mean literally convert them towards Shi'ism. We mean help them become better human beings. And we'll talk about this, that the Prophet himself couldn't convert everyone, fair? But in terms of the Christians, he got the best Christianity out of them. In terms of their Judaism, he got the best version of Judaism out of them. The munafiqeen, he tried to help them to get whatever was goodness within them to get the best out of them. This is also one element of tabligh. We'll speak about this again in 2 and 3 nights' time, inshallah.
Thank you. And just a final question before we wrap up. As a follow-on, so we live in a social and political climate at the moment where it's very Islamophobic to an extent, and there's a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric that's probably in mainstream politics now more than it's ever been previously. So you talked about normalizing the Islamic values.
Yeah.
So what is our obligation to get involved? For example, we had the European elections and there's potentially a general election coming up. So what are our obligations in terms of countering this and getting involved to prevent such anti-Islam rhetoric?
In 4 nights' time, we will be talking about the rise of the far right and how to counter the rise of the far right in the series. And we'll be talking about a number of issues, but the main issue we'll be talking about is ta'leef, and how charitable acts are supposed to be targeting enemies of ours, those who have hatred towards us. This is a Quranic injunction, and we're going to demonstrate this. May Allah bless us. The type of charitable works that we have been doing until now tends to be very much about fighting fires. There's an emergency in Yemen, we raise funds for it. An emergency in Iraq, we raise funds for it. God forbid there was an earthquake in this place, we raise funds for it. That is only one element of sadaqah and zakat. One element. If you look at the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about sadaqah in a completely different way. He speaks about it in a strategic way, about helping against our enemies to either A, push back their enmity, or to make them come closer to us, which we'll be talking about as well. Now, in the point that you raised about going into politics and everything, I'm going to be a bit strict. I'm going to humbly say the following. If you cannot uphold the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ethical responsibilities, being a public-facing Muslim, don't go into politics. We don't need more Sajid Javids, yeah, who's wavering between atheism and Islam, drinking. We don't need more people misrepresenting the faith, selling out the faith in order to open certain doors. We'd rather the doors be closed. Keep the doors closed. I don't want your positions. I don't want to walk into number 10. I don't want to be around people who sell weapons. I don't want to be causing more evil than there already is in the world. If you want to go into politics, first uphold Deen of Islam, manifest that, and then represent your faith. If they don't vote for you, no problem. If they do vote for you, wonderful. But we don't need more Sajid Javids. When we go into the world of representing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam in the public faith, in the public space, we need to do it properly and not do it in accordance with how people want us to bend to their levels of morality.
And what about our obligation, for example, to go out and vote? So not necessarily, be part of politics, but at least, exercising your right.
There is no obligation to vote. Democracy allows you to abstain if you don't find the right candidate.
We have a religious obligation to prevent parties which aren't in the best interests of the deen.
We have an obligation to do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. How that might manifest itself at any one given time will differ from time to space, moment to moment. We can think about this in terms of democracy. If we need to be able to vote someone good in, someone who stands for our ethics, we can't say there is a shar'an obligation to vote. We can say there is a shar'an obligation to do our forbidding of evil and commanding towards good. If that manifests itself in a particular way, such as through exercising a democratic right, then that is an outcome of the obligation on you. It is not an obligation in and of itself. On the other side, similarly, if we need to vote someone out, bring someone out of power that is fundamentally evil, again, our obligation is to do Nahi anil Munkar. How that manifests itself might be in the act of voting. But in and of itself, voting is not obligatory. It's not obligatory in the democratic sense.
Mm-hmm.
You can abstain from voting in the same way in which you can vote. However, obviously, it is important that we engage in the political system and that we vote for those people that we believe are going to be honest actors, that are going to uphold goodness. You will never find a candidate nor a party that represents all of your ideals. What you can say is, X person generally represents what I expect Islam would want from me, and therefore I give my vote to that person, so long as I entrust and have faith that that person will fulfill what their manifesto says that they are going to fulfill.
Thank you. Just one final comment, brother, and then we'll go.
So I think in this country, I don't know too much, but from what I know is that it doesn't matter too much which person you vote in, then it's not going to be too much of a problem for the country as a whole. But if you look in the world, I think that voting is very important because we as Muslims have to stand up against oppression. If we know that if a certain party is voted in, people will be oppressed, maybe not in that same country, maybe the actions of that country, that government will affect other countries and other people. So that's why I want to know more about why we should vote.
More often than not, no matter which political party comes in, there are certain overriding national interests that still governs the party, right? In 1997, when Blair was voted in, we realized that I think probably we could see there was a lot of goodness in him essentially. He wanted to do good. But when push comes to shove, he is an individual, nor his party, nor the media, nor the country was strong enough to be able to stand up to George W. Bush and a rampant series of war crimes that are affecting the world until today. So you need to ensure that the candidate that you are choosing has a demonstrated history that when it comes to being on the right side of things, you can see that that person has been strong enough to be able to stand up for right matters, such that when he's given power, he acts no different as to whether he wasn't in power, as to whether he was in power. Now, obviously, we don't always find that in our candidates. If that is available, that is an ideal for us. But that doesn't mean that even that person is beyond corruption or beyond what lobbyists require from him or what national interest is required from him. So all we can do is say, with the information that is in front of me, I believe this person demonstrates good morals, good ethics. This person might demonstrate God consciousness. If we can stand before God and say that I'm voting for this person because I can see A, B, C, D in he or her, and Allah inquires of me why I did so, I can stand before Him to be able to justify my vote. But we can't be ignorant to realize that there are bigger forces at play. But if you can see in that person an example, a history of goodness, that is more important than their campaign rhetoric.
Thank you very much. And I think with that, we will call it a night. So thank you very much to Sheikh Jafar for his time, and thank you guys for staying. So inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow evening, 7:30 for the 5th lecture in the series with Sheikh Jafar. Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.